I got a lot to tell you about. It won't take a lot of time, and trust me, it is worth your time. Today, we're talking about the most dangerous corporation in the world, Palantir.
I feel like that Antichrist would maybe be using the tools that you were building, right? Like, wouldn't the Antichrist be like, great, you know, we're not going to have any more technological progress, but I really like what Palantir has done so far, right?
Yeah,
I mean, isn't that a concern? Wouldn't that be the irony of history would be that the man publicly worrying about the Antichrist accidentally hastens his or her arrival?
There are all these different scenarios. I obviously don't think that that's what I'm doing.
We live in our peaceful environments, and they need to wake up scared and go to bed scared. They want to know they're safe. And safe means that the other person is scared.
They want to know they're safe. And the only way to be safe is for the other person to be scared, said every psychopathic, warmongering, neocon, techno-fascist that's ever walked the earth. Are you at all concerned that you might be giving rise to the Antichrist, or at least handing the tools over to the Antichrist, or perhaps creating the tools that the Antichrist would want to utilize, and therefore maybe you are in fact him? I don't think I'm doing that. Full cards on the table. I went into this not really sure how I felt about Palantir. As you guys know, well, maybe you don't know, for those that are new here, I'm a libertarian. My starting point is always, I don't trust the government. Therefore, corporations kind of take a back seat to that. That's not to say that I will defend every corporation on earth, just that they're not usually on my radar. What put Palantir on my radar is its incestuous relationship with the government. In the aftermath of 9/11, there was a tremendous amount of concern about security, needless to say. And the war on terror was raging on, and the Patriot Act was being drafted and passed, and there was a consensus that attack may have been able to be stopped if only there had been better communication between the intel agencies. In comes Palantir. In 1998, Peter Thiel, along with Elon Musk and others, founded PayPal. By 2003, Peter Thiel was a very wealthy man. I believe he had walked away with somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 to $100 million in his cash out at that time. So by 2003, he's got this idea. The government is terribly inefficient, as evidenced by their failures that led to the attacks of 9/11. How about a private corporation fills that gap? And fill that gap they did. In 2003, Palantir was founded with approximately $30 million of Peter Thiel's own money. But there was another minority stake that most people overlooked, but actually means everything. It was $2 million from In-Q-Tel.
The origin of In-Q-Tel, the CIA's investment division, traces back to former agency director George Tenet. The goal? Invest in technologies that will serve U.S. national security interests in three main categories: software, infrastructure, and materials sciences. So how much cash is In-Q-Tel investing? Well, the firm has at least $120 million in government dollars to deploy every year. Some of its notable investments include Google, which it's since divested from, Palantir, which was founded by Peter Thiel, and Databricks, which is one of the most valuable private tech companies. As of 2016, the company had 325 investments and kept 100 of them secret. According to the Washington Post, any US entrepreneur working on ways to analyze data better has probably gotten a phone call from In-Q-Tel.
So you're probably saying to yourself, but Clint, Thiel put in $30 million. In-Q-Tel put in $2 million. Is that really that big of a deal? Turns out, yeah, it actually kind of is. As a consequence of them funding about 7% of the startup capital, In-Q-Tel also created the contact list for Thiel and Palantir that enabled them to basically get started. Without their relationship to the government, they would have floundered and flopped. In fact, for the first decade of their existence, almost all of their contracts came from the federal government. Now, full cards on the table. I want to root for Peter Thiel. He is a self-avowed libertarian who talked about seasteading and Bitcoin and all sorts of things that I like a lot. So I just want you to be aware of my bias. I approached this topic wanting to find nothing. I wanted to come away going, well, yeah, I mean, the technology kind of concerns me, but at least there's a libertarian that's running it, so I guess I can sleep easy at night. Tragically, that's not what I found. My only duty is to the truth and to human liberty. Palantir, unfortunately, is a major threat to both. In comes Alex Karp.
We partner with the very best in the world, and when it's necessary, to scare enemies and on occasion kill them. I don't think in win-lose, I think in domination. This is a company built for bad times. Bad times mean strong finances internally. Bad times are very good for Palantir because we build products that are robust, that are built for danger.
Palantir is built for bad times, and he ain't lying. If you look at their stock price, he's definitely not lying. They are crushing. I guess that's the advantage of us being on the cusp of World War III with the proxy war in Ukraine and the war in Gaza and countless other wars, the bombing campaign against Iran, and goodness gracious. So how did my sweet, sweet libertarian Peter Thiel end up in such a predicament? Well, unfortunately, his roommate at Stanford Law was Alex Karp. Now, let me be clear. I am not removing culpability from Thiel, who, after deep diving this topic for the past 30 days, I've come to the conclusion that can't really trust him either. However, there is something particularly jarring about Mr. Karp.
Americans are the most loving, God-fearing, fair, least discriminatory people on the planet. And they want to know that if you're waking up and thinking about harming American citizens, or if American citizens are taken hostage and kept in dungeons, or if you're a foreign power sending fentanyl to poison our people, something really bad is going to happen to you and your friends and your cousins and your bank account and your mistress and whoever was involved. We need to stand up, and those people need to be scared.
Those people need to be scared. It's just that simple. But you'll notice a slip there. He said that they would go after your friends. So people that commit these terrible acts, they'll go after your friends and your mistress. Now, I don't know about you, but that's pretty disturbing to me. And particularly given that he's talking about the war in Gaza, I think it's very indicative of where his loyalties lie. And I'll let you decide for yourself where that may be. Alex does these incredible, flowery diatribes about the West and defending the West.
Because the most important thing, in my view, that can happen for the preservation of the West and its values is for the U.S. military to be by far the best in the world.
And as a member of the West and someone who does think that the West is superior in terms of culture and governance and the people, I love the West. I would like to maintain it. That does not mean that I am willing to become the monsters he seeks to slay. And the defense he gives is so similar to the defense that I see Dave Smith contending with constantly, that it's a moral equivalency. It is a moral equivalency to even compare the pain and suffering of the Palestinians and contrast that with the Israelis because, well, their culture is not as good. That essentially there is no limit to the death and destruction that can be brought to bear against people that are not as good as us, which is eerily reminiscent of George W. Bush. You're either with us or you're with the terrorists.
Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists. From this day forward, any nation that continues to harbor or support terrorism will be regarded by the United States as a hostile regime. There's no negotiations. There's no calendar. We'll act on our time.
After watching hours of Alex Karp interviews, I have come to the conclusion that this man is deeply paranoid. It's almost as if his worldview is trapped within 2003, the founding of Palantir. As if we just got hit with the largest terrorist attack ever in our history, and he hasn't evolved at all, despite the fact that on the homeland, we haven't had an attack in over 20 years, at least not to that scale.
Osama bin Laden.
You know, I'll tell you, the closest thing to an answer is when you open the paper and look in the news about these kind of things, there's a 2/3 chance, depending on the country involved, that somehow my company was involved.
I mean, really think about what he just said there. Anytime you open a newspaper, 2/3 of all of the stories that you read abroad probably had something to do with Palantir. Now, maybe that's marketing spin, and maybe it's not. Maybe that's actually how invasive this company has become and how deeply embedded in the military-industrial complex they now are.
If you do not feel comfortable supporting the legitimate efforts of America and its allies in the context of war, don't join Palantir.
I've created the system which you call kill chain.
Privately. Publicly, the lawyers have some innocuous something like tech for the amelioration of unwanted blah, blah, blah. Some term we're supposed to use.
Okay, let's...
for me, it's the kill chain.
Kill chain sounds good.
The other conclusion you come to about Mr. Karp after studying him for a while is that he's not just comfortable with violence. He seems to enjoy it. to revel in it.
Quicker and better and safer and more violent. Disruption in the end of the day exposes things that aren't working. There'll be ups and downs. There's a revolution. Some people can get their heads cut off. It's like we're expecting to see really unexpected things and to win.
So if you're not comfortable supporting both America and our allies when it comes to war specifically, you should not join Palantir, which ought to draw you to the conclusion that, in fact, this is not just a standard run-of-the-mill Fortune 100 corporation, but in fact, this corporation is dedicated to war fighting. Now, perhaps that wouldn't be so concerning if it was only used abroad, despite the fact that it would still concern me, but for most Americans, it's out of sight, out of mind. But the unfortunate reality is that, in fact, Palantir and its technology is being used domestically, and increasingly so. Now, before I get into that, let's talk a little bit about the technology that they have. As he described, the kill chain.
Can you imagine if ChatGPT decided whether or not you lived or died? It's terrifying to consider. Unfortunately, it's more than just a hypothetical question. It's a reality. 972 magazine discovered that this AI program isn't just a theoretical concept. It actually exists. It's called Lavender, and the Israelis are using it right now in Gaza.
So how does Lavender work? Well, it's a machine learning algorithm which essentially takes in a bunch of battlefield data as well as surveillance data. It combines the two, and then it pushes it through an artificial intelligence analyst to replace the human analyst that would have done that historically. And then it just does it in real time to give them targets in real time on the battlefield, all predicated off of artificial intelligence. Here's the really scary thing about it. According to 972 magazine, who did this study, they have a 10% miss rate, as in we got it wrong. Oops, innocent guy and his entire family. Because the way these bombing runs happen is that they actually target the father, the suspected terrorist, until he goes home. So he is there at home with his family, his kids, whatever. And in the middle of the night, they drop the bomb.
Lavender is used in conjunction with another program known as the Gospel. Lavender identifies and targets people it believes to be suspected militants. The Gospel identifies and targets buildings it believes to be used by suspected militants.
Now, depending on which resource you trust, there's a very wide range of estimates as to the deaths of innocents that have happened in Gaza since the war began 20 months ago. Some people say it's 30,000. Some people say it's 40 or 50 or even 60,000. Some people say it's higher. Obviously, the IDF says it's lower, but they don't give you a real number, so who knows? Regardless, the answer is a lot more than zero, a lot more than zero. In fact, in 2015, Palantir opened up an office space in Tel Aviv. So they actually have operations that run out of Israel. In Ukraine, the collaboration between Palantir and Starlink starkly illustrates the profound impact of integrated technology on warfare. Palantir's AI models provide the Ukrainian military with essential data analytics, transforming raw images from drones, satellites, and ground reports into real-time actionable intelligence. This process, which Palantir's CEO Karp chillingly refers to as a, quote, digital kill chain, end quote, has become central to Ukraine's defense strategy, enabling precise targeting and battlefield assessments. Simultaneously, Elon Musk's Starlink ensures uninterrupted communication for Ukrainian forces, maintaining a continuous flow of critical information vital for modern warfare. Now, with all that being said, there has been massive casualties in Ukraine on both sides of that war. There have been massive casualties in Gaza, once again, on both sides of that war, however, much more on one side. It just so happens that the side that's being devastated right now seems to be at the mercy of Palantir's technology.
Look, we built PG, which single-handedly stopped the rise of the far right in Europe. We built Foundry, which is used to distribute the COVID vaccine and saved millions of lives globally. We built what we call multi-constellation, and what's often called the digital kill chain. And they're category-defining products. So when you deliver these products to the market, honestly, people say this isn't going to exist, this isn't valuable, but then it changes the market. And then the market is the Palantir market. Now, that doesn't mean everyone in the world is going to buy our product, but it means most of the sensible people in the world are going to buy from the category we defined.
So he's saying it openly. They use that technology to suppress the, scare quotes, far right in Europe, which far right in Europe is basically MAGA. It's not far right at all. Then he also brags about Foundry, which was used to track the COVID rollout, the V rollout. And last but not least, the digital kill chain. So their entire lineup is just a litany of products I don't have any interest in.
Palantir is working with the IAEA and is supplying their software for use in the IAEA's Mosaic program. And I did find this from Bloomberg from 2018. Peter Thiel and Palantir are at the heart of the Iran nuclear deal. And they talk about the relationship between Palantir and the IAEA and how they are providing their AI, whatever, algorithmic big data analysis software for the IAEA to come up with its assessments. The question is, why now? Well, obviously, Israel would take any excuse that they can get, but the explicit excuse that appeared on the table was this IAEA updated assessment, which led to the IAEA actually censuring Iran over non-cooperation, or whatever phrase they used. And where did this report come from? Well, it seems, at least to some extent, it has been informed by Palantir data. So, yes, there is an answer which should be very concerning to all of us who are concerned, as you say, at least about the specter of Whopper and the war games of the future and the ability of some AI-enabled assessment to send the world plunging into World War III.
But also, so just as Alex Karp bragged about earlier, about 2/3 of every news story you read when it comes to international relations, it looks like Palantir actually does have that level of impact. Now, if that's the only impact they had, still, I think most Americans probably wouldn't care. Okay, so a bunch of innocent people are getting poo-pooed, like, well, you know, what's new? But unfortunately, it doesn't stop there. In fact, Peter Thiel and his fortune, partially because of Palantir, is responsible not just for monstrous campaign contributions to Donald Trump, helped him get into the White House in 2016, but also his hand-picked guy is J.D. Vance, who he cut a check of $5 million for his Senate race. He also backed him for the VP slot under Trump this last go-around. So to say that they have influence is to put it mildly. And seeing as I've now noticed the connection between Palantir and some of these atrocities, I'm not the only one that has noticed this. In fact, Mr. Karp and Mr. Thiel are being called out for their participation in it, and they are not handling this line of questioning very well.
So what do you think about the use of artificial intelligence, or lavender, by the IDF in identifying Hamas targets?
Look, I'm not, without going into all the I'm not on top of all the details of what's going on in Israel, because my bias is to defer to Israel. It's not for us to second guess everything, and I believe that broadly the IDF gets to decide what it wants to do, and that they're broadly in the right, and that's sort of the perspective I come back to.
Few people get wealthy.
Getting wealthy off of killing Palestinians, with Palantir kills Palestinians with their AI and technology.
Oh.
They're killing my family in Palestine.
Yeah. And you know,
What kind of person are you? How do you sleep at night?
well, if you,
Shame on you.
so the primary source of death in Palestine is the fact that Hamas has realized that there are millions and millions of useful idiots that will.
Using that excuse, this is why you don't get left to speak, because you are killing my people and you're justifying it because of for anyone else.
Can we get security up there?
One of the most.
How dare you?
Okay.
How dare you? Your AI and your technology from Palestinians.
Mostly terrorists. That's true.
No, it's not. If you say mostly, so it's okay to kill.
Okay.
innocent other
Like, if your argument was so strong, wouldn't you let me talk? It's so strong. It's so strong. It's so strong. Your argument is. Thank you for.
For the record, I'm not connecting dots that don't exist. Here's a post from Palantir just a couple years ago. From @PalantirTech on X on October 11th of 2023. So just a few days after the attacks of October 7th, you have them saying certain kinds of evil can only be fought with force. Palantir stands with Israel. So it's not exactly a mystery as to which side they stand with and which side they are helping and destroying. Now, normally I wouldn't be freaking out about all this, but it happens to be that the President of the United States and J.D. Vance and Elon Musk and Speaker Mike Johnson were all at I think it was the Super Bowl. No, it was the Army-Navy game. And on the Jumbotron flashed an image of these four gentlemen along with the logo of Palantir. And given their connections, that became a quickly iconic photograph. And as I keep saying, this is not just a technology being used abroad. It is also being used domestically. As Elon Musk famously came in to the White House or the administration for a few months, and DOGE, the Department of Governmental Efficiency, was responsible for connecting a lot of these dots when it comes to differences between the Treasury Department, the IRS, all of the three-letter agencies, essentially. He comes in and he says, we're going to make this more efficient. As good as that sounds to me, because I am a libertarian and I like small government, I like efficient government. If there's a government at all, I'd like it to be that small that it doesn't even really matter if it's efficient. But if it's going to be as large as this thing is and they're going to tax me as much as they do, I would like them to do a better job. But now that I understand exactly what Palantir does, the fact that that is the software that they provide, that they take in all of this data, all of our data, and then they cross-reference it and they make the data usable to these three-letter agencies, which are ultimately in a position of power, some of which are in a position of power to imprison me, like the IRS. And now I'm starting to better understand the concerns of the Whitney Webbs of the world, who has famously been talking about this for a very long time.
Yeah, so total information awareness was defunded by Congress not long after it was launched because every mainstream media outlet, the ACLU and organizations like it across the board said this will end privacy for Americans. It was going to basically spy on all Americans, total information awareness, right? And decide who was going to commit a crime before it happened.
Yes.
Terror attacks before it happened, bioterror, even pandemics before they happen, which is why a lot of the policies that originally total information awareness proposed came back during the Trump administration during COVID, and Palantir was the contractor for all of those. What do you know?
They're going to use every telephone call you ever make, every text you ever make, every Google search, every website you ever go to. They have a way of collecting all of that data.
They collect all of it.
And they put it into a database on you. And they have this kind of capability. And so immediately after this was invented, you're right, all these organizations pushed back against it. So the government said, okay, we're not going to do it anymore. But then Palantir was like, well, we'll do it.
And let me just start by saying, Whitney, I'm sorry. I beg your pardon. Yes, I did vote for Donald Trump. And yes, I was aware of Palantir. But no, I did not buy or believe your hypothesis that they would, in fact, have so much access to this White House. I mean, giving a campaign contribution is one thing. Having this level of control and implementation into the government is another. So in other words, yes, I was nervous. However, I was also cautiously optimistic. But once you understand exactly how Palantir works, and then you realize that, oh, the CIA is using this, the FBI is using this, the IRS is using this, the Treasury Department's using this, Social Security is using this, INS is using this. It's like, oh my goodness, what have we done? Now, there are some aspects of this technology that people on the right are going to like. For instance, Palantir is being used to help round up and deport illegal immigrants. So you're not going to get any protests from the right-wingers when it comes to that use of this technology. I think the only way that you're going to convince them that this is actually a cause that they ought to be concerned about is to connect the dots that, sure, right now it's being used against Palestinians, which many of you don't care about. It's using against immigrants, which many of you don't care about. What about when it gets used against you? Like when you're dodging your taxes and suddenly Palantir is using the connections between the Treasury Department and Social Security and other entities, and they're ultimately able to connect these dots, and now you may be going to jail. Even better than that, let's hypothesize about, say, a couple years from now, there's a President Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. How would you feel about it then? Because I know you guys trust Trump, but what about if it was Joe Biden or AOC or who knows, Bernie Sanders? You going to feel good then that Palantir has all of your information and they're connecting all of these dots and ultimately feeding it to all of these agencies that have the ability to throw you in jail? I think the obvious answer is no. You shouldn't feel good about that. It ought to concern the hell out of you, because it concerns the hell out of me. And this issue is getting so big that even a stand-up comic like Theo Vaughn, who's interviewing J.D. Vance, the vice president of the United States, is asking him direct questions about Thiel, Palantir, and his connections to them.
This is the Palantir company where they're going to build security databases that have all of our information in them, right?
That's what they're saying, yeah.
And it's going to have like everything. It'll like look at you and know like if you're good at tennis or if you have $60 in your pocket.
I hear that story and my reaction is the same, which is, oh, I don't like the government having my information. The reality is the government already has my information. And more importantly, some of these private technology companies have way more information on me than the government does.
Now, it's obvious we are rapidly sliding into oblivion that you're getting harder-hitting questions from a stand-up comic like Theo Vaughn than you would get from Rachel Maddow or any other Fox News host for that matter. But shout out to Theo Vaughn asking a real question and putting J.D. Vance under the gun. Because the truth is that J.D. Vance's relationship to Peter Thiel is profoundly deep. And I'll let you guys decide if it's profoundly concerning. It is profoundly concerning for me now that I understand what Palantir does and how it does it. But for you, maybe not so much. It's not as if there aren't hundreds or thousands of corporations that have influence over politicians. I would just advise you to contrast the Palantir donations through Thiel to Trump and Vance and contrast that to other corporations and how much they give to politicians. And then contrast that with the government contracts that Palantir receives, which is still the lion's share of their revenue. And then contrast that with the increasing amount of responsibility and data access and surveillance technology that they have. And then you might come to the same conclusion that I have, that this is fucking crazy. And if I still haven't convinced you, let's listen to my buddy Ian Carroll as he explains it.
This won't just get used on critics of the Trump administration. This will get used on critics of every future American government until the end of America, because that's how government works. Once you give them a power, they never give it back. And we are entering into territory from which there is no return. And inflaming leftist talking points are both unnecessary and not the move. This is not a partisan issue. In fact, this is a deeply anti-American issue, and I'm sure I don't need to explain to a conservative why having AI watching you at all times and doling out social credit scores is a bad thing.
Now, obviously, I've gone extra hard on Mr. Karp, but I gotta say, after watching hours of Peter Thiel interviews as I prepared to do this episode for you guys, I came to the conclusion that he is also extraordinarily strange. In fact, in this interview just earlier this week, he's asked specifically if he wants human beings to continue to exist after AI takes over, and he pauses for a long time, as if this is something he's really not sure about. To which I say, what the dude? What are you doing?
You would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would
This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit
Should
in this.
the human race survive?
Yes.
Okay.
But I also would like us to radically solve these problems.
Right.
And so, it's always, I don't know, transhumanism is this, the ideal was this radical transformation where your human natural body gets transformed into an immortal body.
So it's obvious to me that Mr. Thiel is a transhumanist, that he believes that we have to lower government regulations so that we can create these innovations that allow for life extension, et cetera, which I'm okay with life extension. I would like to live longer. Who wouldn't, right? But he takes it to a level that is deeply concerning, where you get to the point where you're so convinced that the advancement of technology and innovation is paramount to all else, that if it means that we have to no longer exist, well, then it sounds like you're okay with it. So while Mr. Karp is much more overt in his disdain for anyone who's not him, Mr. Thiel is a little bit more secret about it, but it does seem that he also has kind of a break a billion eggs to make an omelet type of mentality. Oh, and also, Pete, anytime someone asks you if you want humanity to survive, the answer is fucking yes. Do I need to be your PR coach? What the fuck are you thinking? So to recap, we've got Peter Thiel, who is a transhumanist, who also isn't sure if humanity needs to survive because it might impede in technological progress, as if technological progress is more important than him, us, humanity. All right. Anyways, I got to get past that one. And then you've got Alex Karp, who is, in my opinion, my very humble opinion, after dozens of hours of watching this guy and reading about him, is a psychopath. Sorry, I'm not going to mince my words. I think he's a psychopath. I'm not a doctor. I can't diagnose it. I'm just telling you, he strikes me as a very dangerous human being. He has all of the hallmarks of a neoconservative and a sociopath, if not a psychopath. Dangerous, dangerous guy. Now, for those that aren't aware, Peter Thiel, he is the funding and one of the founders and also obviously a big shareholder still of Palantir. He is not the day-to-day guy. Karp is the day-to-day guy. And I am very concerned about Mr. Karp.
It's the most effective way for social change is humiliate your enemy and make them poorer. And that's how social change actually happens.
Setting aside the weirdness with Thiel, which is also worth noting. So the two primary players inside of Palantir are very strange and very dangerous people, in my opinion. But even if they weren't, this is still a technology that's extraordinarily dangerous. Oh, and might I add that it is almost certainly a CIA front. And I think the biggest thing to take away from all of this is that if you guys remember the censorship regime that happened under the Biden administration when it came to Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, it was Twitter at the time, other social media platforms too, YouTube, where there was back channeling from the Biden administration telling them what to censor. And the reason they did it that way is because it's against the Constitution if the government censors you. However, if they can circumvent that and make it so that they're just applying pressure, this coercive pressure to private institutions, they can do things that the government can't. And I think that's exactly why In-Q-Tel exists, is that they fund businesses to do deeds that they can't do, at least not legally. Now, there has been Supreme Court precedent in the past that says even if they do this, that's still unconstitutional because they're trying to circumvent our rights. But that doesn't mean that the Supreme Court will stand up or that it'll even ever be seen or heard in front of the Supreme Court. So I think at this point, that's kind of how I perceive Palantir. It is a mechanism to circumvent the Bill of Rights, our privacy rights, our speech rights, etc. And I think the overarching point is that even if this wasn't Palantir, even if Alex Karp wasn't the guy or Thiel, that's not really the key point here. The key point is those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Benjamin Franklin, one of our founding fathers. And now, my normal audience is very libertarian, and I would guess, given the nature of this topic, I will have a lot of non-libertarians that watch this episode. But I would still apply that same message to you. Even if you want the government to be used against your enemies, it will be used against you, be it the Trump administration versus the left or the AOC administration versus the right. This should not be partisan. If you care about your freedoms, your free speech, your due process, your privacy rights, everybody should be on the same page here. And every time you hear about the Trump administration or any future administration granting more funding to an institution like Palantir, it doesn't even have to be Palantir, it could be some new In-Q-Tel funded spinoff. Your immediate instinct ought to be on guard, and your call to action is to oppose it, to be loud about it, and to let your elected officials know that if they vote for this stuff, they go bye-bye via the voting box, obviously. Palantir, to me, is essentially the AI version, the modern version of Blackwater, Halliburton, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, all of the military-industrial complex corporations which made a fortune off of the war on terror. And as the war drums beat louder, as we inch ever closer to the potential for a world war, you ought to expect that companies like Palantir are going to get more and more funding and more power, and they're going to do it in more and more nefarious and secretive ways, and it's going to be hard to track, just as Blackwater once changed its name, for instance. This is a problem that is not going away. In fact, AI is a problem all on its own, which I may do an episode in the future about. If you'd like me to do that, drop a comment down below. But even setting aside the inherent dangers that can come along with the advent and the improvement of artificial intelligence, Palantir is doing things that are, by their very nature, a danger to you and I. For those that are new here, I just set up this studio after moving a couple months ago, 6 weeks ago, and dumped a ton of money into it. Obviously, this has been a labor of love for me, a passion project. I poured my soul into this one. So all I ask of you is two things. One, pick up your phone right now and subscribe to Liberty Lockdown. In fact, better than that, pick up everybody you know's phone and subscribe to Liberty Lockdown on whatever platform you're watching or listening to. Obviously, it's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all over the place. And two, if you found any aspect of this interesting, which you probably did, because if you didn't, then I really did a bad job, but I didn't. I crushed it. Let's be honest. If you can take clips, share them on your own social media, or just send the link out to your friends and family and just force them to watch it, as you've now recognized the same existential threat that Palantir represents that I recognized a few weeks ago. And last but not least, as always, click that like button, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and hug and kiss your mother, your grandma, your father, your children, whoever, your girlfriend, your wife, your husband. I'm being very inclusive today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. My name is Clint Russell. If you'd like to support my work, there's links in the description down below. You can subscribe, and yeah, we're out of here. Peace.
We have a lot of individual investors on the line. Is there anything you'd like to say before we end the call?
We're doing it. We're doing it. And I'm sure you're enjoying this as much as I am.